All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey. I'm your host. Thank you all very much for being here, for tuning in. Uh, Please interact with the product. Like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, tell a stranger, tell an enemy. I don't care. That again, that helps us all with the almighty algorithm. So please, if you would, I deeply appreciate it. I appreciate you just listening. I mean, Lord knows you don't have to, so thank you. Uh, but if you could help us out a little bit with that, I even more appreciated. Try not to grade my appreciation, but I'm going to for the sake of that. All right, on the agenda this evening, we have UFC on ESPN Plus 42 / UFC Vegas 18. That came our way last night as I record this. Uh, Solid card. In places, pretty darn good. A preview of UFC 258, which will be coming our way this coming Saturday. And, well, not a lot of news again. The UFC did some roster cuts. I think that's kind of the big thing. Uh, yeah, again, that's kind of the big one. We'll see what else kind of kicks loose as we're in the midst of going through the podcast here, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. So I'm flying solo, so let us jump right in to our first point of discussion. UFC on ESPN Plus 42. Main event. Alexander Volkov defeated Alistair Overeem via TKO, mostly punches, 2:06 of the second. This was a really, really good performance from Volkov. Might be his best in the UFC. It's this or his win over Fabricio Verdum. Both of those just top-notch performances. He looked great here. He had to eat a couple of punches from Overeem along the way, but just sharp, crisp, straight punches. Had a good jab, and since they were always opposite stance, that's not an easy thing to do. The jab is a different kind of weapon when you're opposite stances. But he had a good jab. He busted up Overeem in the first, second, kept on the pressure, was able to kind of find the little holes in Overeem's high. He's got that really high kind of cover-up defense, and some of those smaller gloves can just slip around some of the corners. And in the second, he clipped him with a left hook. Overeem staggered forward onto his hands and knees. The referee waved it off. A good stoppage. Sucks for Overeem, man. He was trying to make one more run towards the title. And this doesn't completely eliminate that possibility, but it's now a really, really hard thing for him to potentially pull off if he's going to. As for Volkov, you know, of his losses in the UFC, there are two. I hate to say one of them is illegitimate, but hear me out here, because it was a perfectly valid knockout loss he suffered to Derek Lewis. The caveat there is he beat the crap out of Derek Lewis for 14 of the 15 minutes. Then in the last 50 seconds or so of the fight, Lewis gets a little bit aggressive and wild and desperate, and Volkov stops fighting the way he'd been fighting, gets clipped, and gets finished. Point being there, if you have that rematch, is there really a whole lot of doubt about Volkov winning? Again, Lewis, I'm not trying to bury the guy. That's a rough matchup for him if Volkov doesn't just decide to try and imitate Stefan Struve in the final 30 seconds or so of that fight. I think there were two 10-8 rounds for Volkov in that one. At least one of them was. Then he has the loss to Curtis Blaydes, and that's a bit trickier. You see, Blaydes is a tough matchup for him. I mean, Blaydes has beaten everybody he's faced except Francis Ngannou. That's a tough stylistic matchup. Not unwinnable, but very tough. But apart from that, he beat Timothy Johnson, beat Roy Nelson, knocked out Struve, knocked out Verdum, beat the crap out of Derek Lewis before getting finished late, and kind of again, not fluke knockout, but again, fluke is like who in the world could have predicted that? But just, again, an unlikely outcome. Beat Greg Hardy, lost to Blades, then finished in back-to-back fights, Walt Harris and Alistair Overeem. Dude's in the title picture. Now, where exactly, that's hard to parse. We know Stipe and Ngannou are scheduled to have their rematch. You've got John Jones coming into the division, and John is almost certainly someone they could put immediately into the title picture, kind of depending on who wins. I think if Ngannou wins, they'll give Jones the immediate shot, because Ngannou has knocked Curtis Blades out twice, and that just sucks for Curtis Blades. And I hate to say it that bluntly, but it does. If Stipe wins, Curtis has a better claim towards a title shot, but they could very easily still parachute John over him into the title picture because John is a significantly bigger attraction, especially on pay-per-view, than Curtis Blades is. Again, not trying to knock Curtis Blades, that's just reality as it currently stands. But Volkov, he could fight the loser of Stipe and Ngannou too. You could rematch Derek Lewis. Lewis has another fight coming up, though. I forget against who. But, yeah, give him the loser of that title fight, and if he wins that, give him a shot. I mean, there's not a whole lot else you can do. Volkov's a tough customer to figure out, man. He's tall, he's long, he knows how to fight tall and long. He knows how to fight in close if he needs to. Good kicks, good power. Not impossible to take down, but hard to take down. Surprisingly adept at bottom game. I mean, Blades held him down for long periods of time, but was not able to deal a significant amount of damage. Some of the other guys Blades has fought, he's dealt out some significant damage. He wasn't able to do so against Volkov. Yeah, it's Lewis. Right? Lewis and Blades are going to be fighting, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Again, the top of heavyweight's just a little bit wonky right now between Stipe and Ngannou 2. Some of the holdups that have happened around the top of the division with Stipe, having more important duties to perform than fighting as the UFC heavyweight champion. The man is a firefighter, paramedic. And, when the pandemic hit, that took precedent for good reason. And factor in John coming up to heavyweight. It's just really, really unclear at the moment. But Volkov is certainly a player in the title picture that is undeniable at this point. I don't know what to do with Overeem. Again, that really sucks for him, but if he wants to keep fighting, I'd kind of rather he hang him up. It would suck to go out this way, but he's 41, 42? How old is he? He's 40. He'll be 41 in May. So not all that long from now, actually. It's just tough, man. He's got a lot of years. He's got a lot of fights across both MMA and his kickboxing career. That adds up. It just does. So again, if he wants to continue, I wouldn't be opposed to him getting, another fight or two in the UFC to kind of see where things shake out, but wouldn't be shocked. He's not cheap either. They disclose his, I forget how much Alistair Overeem makes a fight. He might be like the 500,000 club, something like that. Again, not a cheap fighter. The UFC might wind up cutting him and let him, kind of see out his career in another promotion. Again, sucks for Overeem, but we'll see if the UFC wants to keep him around, and if he wants to try and continue this run and maybe try to. It's just a really hard thing, man. He already lost to Stipe. He's lost to Curtis Blades. Now he's lost to Volkov. It's just for as quick as you can get to the title level at heavyweight. When you've been around for a while, heavyweight's weird. The longer you are at heavyweight, the harder it becomes to kind of break out of your spot. And right now, Overeem's spot is just a little below the title level. I mean, you could do a rematch with Overeem and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, but I mean, I wouldn't hate that, to be quite candid. But, again, tough. Not a whole lot else to say there. Co-main event. Good grief. Corey Sandhagen knocks out Frankie Edgar with a flying knee in 28 seconds. I don't even really know what to say about this one. I'm pretty sure I picked Corey. I said I'd feel better picking him over 5 rounds instead of just 3, for a variety of reasons. Some of which are still very valid observations, just didn't necessarily manifest in this particular fight. Sandhagen just kind of drew Edgar forward, left to right, and just timed a beautiful jumping knee to the face. This was probably the closest we'll ever get to a live action version of that the like anime shot where the two guys charge at each other and then they get past each other and they're both just holding their stances and then one of them falls over after a second or two. Sandhagen hits this knee, lands further away from Edgar. Edgar is, I mean, he's out, but he stays kind of upright for half a second and then starts pitching forward, and Sandhagen, looking over his shoulder, sees that and just kind of keeps walking. A absolutely cold walk-off knockout. I mean, look, Frankie Edgar's lost before. Frankie Edgar's been knocked out before. Not like this, man. This, even the Korean Zombie who stopped him in the first, or Brian Ortega, both of them stopped him in the first with strikes. It took him some time, I mean, Ortega hurt him with the elbow, and then it took him a bit to kind of finish him from there. Or Zombie just beat the crap out of him for almost that entire first round before forcing the issue to just one and done. Oof. I mean, it's just a thing of beauty. Corey Sandhagen's only loss in the UFC to Aljamain Sterling. He wants that rematch. He wants the belt next. I give it to him. Give him that title shot next. I know TJ Dillashaw is off suspension now officially, I believe, and coming back. Under slightly different circumstances, I could see them trying to, give TJ an immediate shot back at the belt. I don't want it. I don't want it here. You've got a clear-cut, unquestioned #1 contender in Corey Sandhagen. I don't even care if Sterling beats Jan. I want the rematch. Like, his last 2 fights, he wheel kick KO'd Marlon Moraes in the second round. And here, in less than 30 seconds, flying knee to knock out Frankie Edgar. You can't really do a whole lot more than that. Give him the title shot. Look, TJ Dillashaw did it to himself, what happened with him losing the belt the way he did. That's 100% on him. Under different circumstances, I might be more sympathetic to him crawling for an immediate title shot. Under these circumstances, the timeout, the fact that you did it to yourself, the fact that we have a clear, thriving, I mean, there's kind of you might try to make an analog to John Jones getting shot, coming back off of one of his suspensions or any of his myriad issues. The biggest difference is the state of the division. Light heavyweight, not a great division. Certainly not when John was kind of coming back from some of his problems or being stripped or any of it. Again, not a great division. Bantamweight, maybe the best division in the UFC. It's hard to say between that and lightweight. But somebody put out a question on Twitter. I forget who, so I apologize. But it was, which of these top 3 is better? You have the lightweight top 3, which is like Dustin, Gaethje, and Charles Oliveira, if we exclude Khabib. Featherweight, which is Volkanovski, Max Holloway, Brian Ortega. Or bantamweight, Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling, Corey Sandhagen. I mean, not to knock featherweight, but I think that's pretty clearly, I shouldn't say pretty clearly, I think that's the lowest of those 3. That said, the top 3 of featherweight is better than I would off the top of my head, it's better than every other division apart from those two. Uh, maybe welterweight might that might be an argument for welterweight, but point being, bantamweight's great. It's in a very healthy place. We have a clear-cut number one contender you would be screwing over for no reason other than some affection for TJ Dillashaw. Look, give him a fight. Give Dillashaw a high-profile fight back. Make it a title eliminator. And if he wins that fight, give him another. I'm not opposed to him getting a quick shot at the belt. If he comes back and he looks great, and he starches some top bantamweight contender. Jeez, bring up the rankings here. Who would I like to see TJ fight as he returns? Actually, now that I think about it, because if I want Sandhagen to fight for the belt next, you have Jan and Sterling. Because Frankie lost, so he's gonna drop. Okay. You got Rob Font currently sitting at number 5. Why is Garbrandt ranked 3rd? He was talking about dropping to flyweight, and he's been inactive forever. And for the record, I don't need to see a trilogy fight between Dillashaw and Garbrandt. You could do Dillashaw and Rob Font. I mean, Rob Font, not a sexy name, but that man's no joke. You got Jose Aldo hanging out at 6. I mean, who wouldn't be interested in Dillashaw and Aldo? I think those are kind of your clubhouse leaders. And again, these rankings have not been updated, so Edgar's going to drop. So Font will probably be number 4. Personally, I would remove Garbrandt from the top 5. I mean, I know he had that really nice knockout of Austin Sao, but he's been out for a while. He's been out for a while, which is always a problem for me. And his last fight was talking about he was trying to fight at flyweight, which I don't object to if he can do that safely and he wants to try it out. I mean, that's the kind of move that I think kind of suspends your top title challenger ranking eligibility. Just my opinion. So I'd do Dillashaw and Font. Make it a fight night main event. You got the return to the former champion against the rising contender. Winner has next after Garbrandt fights Sterling Yan winner. Right? And you can probably time that out so nobody's out of action for too long. But yeah, that's what I want to see from Dillashaw. I don't think you should give him an immediate shot at the belt after not with the division as good as it is. And not with if the guy had been injured, again, I'm more sympathetic to that. But even then, Dominic Cruz came back from his long injury and had to fight Takeya Mizugaki. So I still think you give him. I mean, again, maybe you want to give him a slightly softer touch than Font, so you go a little further down. You got both Pedro Munoz and Jimmy Rivera. Not that those guys are soft touches. I really don't mean to imply that. Just kind of relative to a top 5 guy in Rob Font versus someone on the lower end of the top 10 in Rivera and Austin Sao. So it's just minor degrees of gradation there. But I don't think, I give Sandhagen the next shot. Not a whole lot of controversy there. As for Edgar, I hate to phrase it this way, but Frankie Edgar's 39. Somewhat fresh 39. His birthday's in October. But he's 39 and smaller weight classes that reward youth in ways that some of the heavier weight classes don't necessarily. Frankie has the most total cage time of anyone in UFC history. That's a lot of miles, and he's been in the UFC since, 2007? Yeah, when he upset Tyson Griffin at UFC 67. So 2007. So that was February 3rd. So he just recently had his anniversary there. Jeez, how many years would that be? 10 to 2017. 14 years? Yeah, 14 years. Good grief. 14 years in the UFC, a bunch of that at the title level. I mean, he first fought for the belt against BJ in 2010. That went 5. His rematch with Penn went 5. His first title fight with Maynard went 5. His rematch with Maynard went into the 4th. Both of his fights with Benson Henderson went 5. The Aldo fight went 5 when he dropped to featherweight. I mean, he's just been fighting. I mean, and all credit to the man. There's not really a soft touch in his. Let me read his UFC resume, just kind of from start to finish here. Bear in mind, he also has a win over Jim Miller outside the UFC. But Tyson Griffin, Mark Bocek, Spencer Fisher, Gray Maynard, Hermes Franca, Sean Shirk. Matt Veach is probably the softest touch this guy's ever had. And that's not soft. BJ Penn twice, Gray Maynard 2 more times, Benson Henderson twice, Jose Aldo, Charles Oliveira, BJ Penn a 3rd time, Cub Swanson, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendez, Aldo a 2nd time, Jeremy Stevens, Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega, Cub Swanson, Max Holloway, Chan Sung Jung, Pedro Munoz, and Corey Sandhagen. Find me like I said, the closest thing you get to a quote-unquote soft touch there is Matt Veach. Not a lot of guys remember Matt Veach, but he did all right in the UFC. He retired back in 2016 with a professional record of 17-5. Went 1-2 in the UFC before fight. I mean, Frankie was his first professional loss. He TKO'd Matt Grice in the UFC before that. So not a soft touch. I mean, he was 11-0 going into that Edgar fight. So again, I defy you to find an easy quote-unquote fight in Edgar's entire UFC run. And again, if you get outside the UFC, coming into the UFC, he had wins over both Jim Miller and Davidis Torisavicius, which may not be a name that a lot of you guys remember, but Lord help me, I do. Yeah, just not an easy fight in that entire freaking 14 years in the UFC. I mean, what do you want to say, man? The end is nigh for him. It just is. That's rough, and I hate to, you kind of hate to say it, but at 39, it just kind of is. I mean, I don't know that he'll see it that way. I just, for me, I'm not saying the guy should retire. I don't have the medical expertise. I don't know the man. But just as a fan, I don't want to see him fight too many more times. And that sucks to say because Frankie has put on some of the... I mean, think about that list I just read off. How many of those fights are great fights? I mean, not all of them, but the majority of those they were great fights. Some all-time great fights. The man's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the end comes for everybody in this game as far as that goes. And at a bare minimum, I think he should have a plan in place to be done sooner rather than later. Sorry to end discussion of that on a downer, but let's move on. Clay Guida defeated Michael Johnson via unanimous decision, 30-27. I thought Johnson had the second. I was a little surprised by 30-27 across the board. But I don't really have any issues with Guida winning the first and third. This was, in some respects, the worst Michael Johnson has looked in a while. I mean, Clay Guida's the same guy he was when jeez. Talking about Edgar and having a long tenure. Guida, he debuted for the UFC in 2007 as well, January. So he's 2006, excuse me, October of 2006. So yeah, he's a little over the 14-year mark as well. And he's basically the same guy now as he was, kind of when he debuted. Same style, and that's in some respects commendable. I mean, the man's fighting style is labor intensive, and he can still do it at He's what? How old is he? He's 39 as well. Uh, yeah, that again, there's something commendable about that, but yeah. Uh, Also, it's kind of an indictment of anybody losing to him at this point. He's not had a good record recently. I mean, he was 1-4 in his last, excuse me, 1-3 in his last four. The only win was over B.J. Penn. And he got choked out by both Charles Oliveira and Jim Miller, and then beat up by Bobby Green. If you're losing to this guy at this point, you've got some serious questions to ask yourself, and I think that's where Michael Johnson is. Johnson now on a 4-fight losing streak. I mean, Michael Johnson is such a weird guy to try and. You look at his career. Think about this for just a second. The man has wins over Edson Barboza, Tony Ferguson, and Charles Oliveira. Let me double check the Oliveira thing. Sorry, not Oliveira. Dustin Poirier. And he stopped Poirier. Those are quality wins. He's also got some weird losses. Paul Sass. I mean, his UFC debut was a loss in that season of The Ultimate Fighter when Jonathan Brookins beat him. Submitted by Reza Madadi. He's got some losses that, like, okay, we all understand. Beneil Dariush, I thought he won that fight. I scored it for him at least. Khabib, Gaethje, Josh Emmett. Like some of those losses, like, okay, I get it. Some of them, he's got a losing UFC record, I think. Almost certainly. I don't have it. I'm not going to count it out on the air, but again, when he's on, the man can beat just about anybody, but it's so inconsistent. Now, his time in the UFC might be coming to a close, too, off the back of this. A frustrating fight to watch. Alexandre Pantoja defeated Manel Kape via unanimous decision, 229-28, 130-27. Kape showed the ability to win this fight. He showed good technical skills, but he just didn't have the kind of output you need. I mean, Pantoja won this fight largely based on doing stuff. Even if it wasn't the most effective stuff, he was the one putting forth the effort. And then in the third round, he spent the last chunk of it on Kape's back. But yeah. I was looking forward to Kape's UFC debut. I've watched his stuff in Rise and then some other promotions. He's a good fighter. He's a really good fighter. So a little bit frustrating to watch him underperform like that. Your fight of the night, Beneil Dariush defeated Diego Ferreira via split decision. They were 29-28. I do not understand what the judge was watching to give Ferreira 2 rounds. I was 30-27 Dariush. That said, the third round going to Ferreira is eminently understandable and might even be correct might even be the correct score as opposed to mine. But the first 2 I thought were pretty clearly Dariush. This was a great fight. This was action from start to finish, basically. These two kicked at distance. They slugged it out in close. They scrambled like madmen on the ground. Phenomenal fight. Again, only 3 rounds, which is a shame. Look, and the Sandhagen and Edgar fight could have easily headlined their own fight nights. So Dariush is now back to 6 in a row again. Give that man a top opponent next for Pete's sake. I mean, talking lightweight. I mean, there's several of these guys that we don't really know what's up with them right at the moment. I mean, Khabib's retired. So we got Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira, Chandler, Ferguson. I mean, put him in against any of those guys. He was ranked what coming into this? This has him listed at 13. I thought he was listed higher than that. Uh, hmm. I thought he was higher than that last night on what they said he was. Hmm. That's odd. Anyway, neither here nor there. Um, Point being, he should fight someone near the top five. I mean, the lowest he should go next is someone like RDA at 7. Uh, I mean, you can't do him in Chandler, which kind of sucks. Oliveira's the top 4 guys are going to fight each other in some capacity. But Dariush and Tony Ferguson, Dariush and RDA, anybody going to object to that? That's the kind of fight he's due, I think. Now that assumes that Tony's even sticking around at lightweight. Tony was chirping a little bit at Nate Diaz on social media, and if Tony moves up to welterweight, even if for a one-off against Nate, I think Tony would carve him to pieces. By the way, but I wouldn't object to it. Tony was on the wrong end of, in some cases, just straight booking decisions. In others, just just straight up bad luck. Uh, him getting a nice big payday against Nate, if that's where everyone decides to go, I wouldn't begrudge that man one dime of that money. Not one red cent of it. But give Dariush someone at the top. I mean, he's earned that. I think he mentioned on the post fight, his interview after the fight. Fahea having to fight down when he was number 10, a little bit disrespectful of the Fahea's win streak, which was at 6. Dariush had 5 coming into this. Now, of course, Dariush at 5. Dariush will be at 6 in terms of his winning streak. Um, yeah, those guys should be fighting up. Uh, Certainly when you're on those kinds of winning streaks, you shouldn't be fighting down. So give him someone, kind of near the top, as close to the top as you can reasonably get. Anyway, that was your fight of the night. Current frontrunner for fight of the year. I know, short list, right? And I think that's like that and one other fight currently on there for me, but best 3-rounder of the year, I think, pretty easily. Kicking off the main card, Danilo Marquez defeated Mike Rodriguez via technical submission. Rodriguez was a pretty hefty favorite, according to the odds. I was a little bit surprised by that. He's been real hit and miss in the UFC. Pretty good stuff from Marquez here. It's just lower level light heavyweight, so it's really hard to get a bead on who might actually be somebody and who's not. But Marquez, I think he's 2-0 in the UFC now, so maybe someone at least kind of keep on your radar as far as that goes. That was the main card. As for the prelims, Devontae Smith defeated Justin James via doctor stoppage, 3:38 of the second. In the second, Smith just he hit him with an elbow at one point, which I think started everything. But what's caused the swelling that stopped the fight was Smith was kind of on James' back, and he was hitting him with these palm heel strikes, like right to the eye, and just hit something just right, either exacerbate what was already there or cause it to begin with. He wound up disengaging from James, made him stand up, and as soon as the ref got a look at that eye, like, okay, Doc, get in here. Uh, James' left eye was completely swollen shut. No issues with the stoppage as far as that goes. James was upset, but if an eye is closed, you can't see, you can't fight. That's just kind of the way it is. Smith, again, might be someone to pay attention to at lightweight. He's still young, he's still coming up, and lightweight is, the feeding ground of all feeding grounds, but just someone to maybe pay attention to a little bit. Carol Hossa defeated Jocelyn Edwards via unanimous decision, 30-27 on all 3 scorecards. Decent enough fight here. Edwards had moments on the feet, but couldn't reliably keep Hossa off of her, and ultimately just succumbed to positional losses both in the clinch and on the ground. Hossa might be due a more notable fight next. She's now, I think, 3-0 in the UFC. Double check that. Either 2-0 or 3-0. Yeah, 3-0. Still no finishes, but let's see, women's bantamweight. I'd give her someone like, Penny Kianzad, Sijara Eubanks, that lower top 15. Let's see how she would shake out there. Laura Precipio. I think that's how it was. I can never remember. I had a little mnemonic trick for this, but I can't. Procopio. That's it. Laura Procopio. Like a cornucopia. That's how I do it. That was it. Laura Procopio defeated Molly McCann unanimous decision, 29-27, 29-28, 30-27. McCann just kept getting drowned in the grappling of Procopio. Kind of as far as that went. Seung-Woo Choi defeated Yusuf Zalal via unanimous decision. A little bit surprising here. Zalal had a pretty solid 2020. He got outstruck by Ilia Topuria, but you kind of thought he'd rebound here, and Choi paid to that. Choi beat him on the feet, beat him on the ground when they got there. Really solid outing from Choi. Also at featherweight, Timur Valiev defeated Martin Day via unanimous decision. 230-25s, 130-26. This was a total wipeout in favor of Valiev. Valiev, who had the little bit of a stumble. It got turned to a no contest, so he's still unbeaten in his last 7 fights. But he had the stumble in his debut. He rebounded, looked sharp on the feet, was beating him there, but just had an overwhelming advantage once they got into the grappling. A lot of fence wrestling, a lot of positional advantages. Valiev's legit. I mean, we still have to see him against increasing levels of opposition as far as that goes. But yeah, dude's legit. Pay attention to him. And kicking everything off, Ode Osborne knocked out Jerome Rivera 26 seconds of the first round. Yeah, Rivera threw a left kick, kind of tried to be high, but it got hung up kind of between the shoulder and the elbow as Osborne kind of shoulder rolled. Osborne did this really neat little trick. He kind of shelved up his elbow so it was tight to his ribs when he shoulder rolled. He was fighting southpaw. He took it on the right arm. Then as he comes back, he kind of brings it up at a 90-degree angle to create a shelf that kept Rivera's legs suspended in midair on it so he couldn't move and reset, which left a really nice straight punching lane for Osborne's left hand, and he cracked it, dropped Rivera, and that was basically all she wrote. So that was the event. Some good fights there. Top 2 fights, both really good. Dariush and Fahea, great fight. Go out of your way to find that one. That was worth every minute of that fight. It was a really solid night of fights. I shouldn't say thoroughly entertained. I was not bored for the vast majority of it, so I'll take that these days. I really will. All right, moving on. UFC 258. Main card, main event. All right, I'm gonna say this, and I'm not trying to piss anybody off here, but this card does not have a lot of not a lot of value here in terms of your money. They tried this. One of the things from last week. The UFC tried to add Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler to this card. Those two should not be fighting each other on 2 weeks' notice. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for either of them to accept the fight on those conditions. None. Straight up none. I don't blame either of them for turning it down. You want those two to fight, I don't object to that fight. But give them a proper camp. Don't have some, mid-level actuary in the bureaucracy of the promotion look at this card and go, we need value. How about we throw 2 top lightweights on there 2.5 weeks out from the event? It would have been a huge disservice to both of those men. Shame on the UFC for even I shouldn't say completely shame on them. They're trying to add value to the card. I get it, but you should have thought about that beforehand, man. You should have planned that out a lot better. That said, the main event is a really, really good fight on paper. Now, it might not wind up being the most compelling fight in terms of the action once they get into the cage, But this is absolutely, unequivocally, the fight to make in this particular weight class. Kamaru Usman, welterweight champion, defending his belt against Gilbert Burns. These two were supposed to fight, what was it, UFC 251? Yeah, 251. Burns had to pull out with a COVID issue. Masvidal stepped in on a couple of days' notice. Usman retained. They tried to have this recently. They tried to have this at 256, but Usman was still kind of recovering from some nagging injuries and whatnot. They bumped it to this one. Here we are. This is again, on paper, this is a competitive fight in most areas. Kamaru Usman's greatest strength, I think, is that he can force the fight to take place in an area where he is better. Whatever that happens to be. When he fought Damian Maia, it was, I'm going to make this fight be on the feet. A little bit the same for the Colby Covington fight. Don't know why I blanked on his name for a minute there. In both instances, for different reasons. Either because Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu was just enough of a problem that he didn't want to deal with it. Or most of the wrestling exchanges against Covington, because again, they have very different approaches and different styles when you kind of get into the nuances of it, but it just wasn't an area he really wanted to spend a lot of time in. So, force him to strike at distance, where he is not great, but certainly capable. Against someone who's a better striker than he is, force it into the clinch, force it onto the mat. If he's fighting someone who is, again, maybe a better pure scrambler on the mat, he can force the fight to be in the clinch. If he's fighting someone who's a really good clinch fighter, he can use the clinch to set up his takedowns instead of an end unto itself. He's comfortable fighting both of those, either using the clinch to get takedowns or using the clinch to hold you in place and beat the crap out of you, and shifting between those two as necessary. And if he's not comfortable in either of those spaces, he will strike with you. Again, is he a great striker? Not. He hasn't demonstrated that to this point, is maybe the best way to say that. But he is certainly capable. And that, again, that kind of dynamic allows him to find some aspect of the fight game, be that fighting at distance, fighting in close, fighting in the clinch, fighting on the ground. Somewhere, he's going to find an aspect of the sport where he is the better fighter, and he is going to then do everything he can to force the fight to be contested in that space where he is winning. And that is a hard thing to beat. The way Burns matches up with him then becomes incredibly intriguing, because Burns, not exactly the same, but he certainly has on paper a lot of questions and a lot of skills to challenge Usman in all of those distances and disciplines. If we're talking about just on the feet, it's not that Kamaru Usman doesn't have power, but I think if you compare him and Gilbert Burns, which of them hits harder, I think it's Burns. They've fought the same guys a few different times. They both fought Damian Maia. Kamaru Usman went the distance with him. Burns knocked him out in the first round. Now, there was some time between those, so in fairness to Usman not getting a finish, relative to Burns getting one. Maia's chin is degraded since then, but it's still noted. If you watch the Tyron Woodley fights, for both of them, does Usman, land on Woodley and rattle him a little bit? Yeah. Which of these two, when they landed, hurt Tyron more? I'm pretty sure that's Gilbert Burns. Now again, could Usman knock Burns out? Sure. Wouldn't shock me at all. But I think Gilbert Burns probably hits a little bit harder and has worked diligently on his striking. Both men are not afraid to kick, but Usman's got some skinny legs. If he's on the wrong end of some nasty calf kicks, I wonder what kind of impact that might have on him. Again, maybe none, but I think it's an open question. Gilbert Burns can fight in the clinch. He fought Tyron Woodley there for big portions of their fight and beat him pretty comprehensively. On the ground, there's not a lot of guys in the division or in all of the UFC that can match Burns' jiu-jitsu credentials. to say nothing of his implementation of jiu-jitsu in an MMA context. He's very, very good at that. So wherever Usman chooses to fight this fight, Burns is going to have problems for him to deal with. Now, insurmountable problems, that certainly remains to be seen. But if you looked at Usman and Masvidal, I mean, especially on short notice, not to insult Masvidal at all, Usman's the better wrestler. And whether that's fence wrestling or wrestling on the mat, he could pretty reliably force the fight there. That made sense on paper, especially on short notice. That's kind of what played out. It's just a lot less clarity around that when it comes to Usman and Burns. Can Usman take Gilbert Burns down? Sure. Usman has taken down everybody thus far. I think maybe except Covington. That would be the only one that I would have to double check. Everyone else, yeah, he took him down. A lot, frequently, more than once. Again, maybe the Maia fight as well, but again, can he take Gilbert Burns down? I would, if he wants to, yes. He's that good a wrestler. How does Burns' guard play up against Usman's top game? If Usman I think the biggest differential in terms of skill, believe it or not, is the pure jiu-jitsu in favor of Burns. Now, it's entirely possible that Usman gets takedowns into decent top position and then just doesn't try to play the jiu-jitsu game, but just focuses on maintaining an advantageous position, sneaking in damage, and is able to kind of win enough rounds over the course of the fight to win. Wouldn't surprise me. But you play in the guard of Gilbert Burns at your peril. You've got to get out of that thing pretty quickly. And that said, taking Gilbert Burns down is not exactly an easy proposition. To say nothing of the trouble you could find yourself in when you get there. Burns is not opposed to taking you down. Now, taking Kamaru Usman down has proven to be an incredibly difficult task thus far. Not impossible. No one's impossible to take down, but Usman is very, very difficult. So we might see Burns try that avenue. I still, for whatever value you want to give my pick, I favor Usman. I'm going to need a real clear reason to favor someone else over him. But Gilbert Burns is certainly a qualified enough fighter, a good enough fighter at all the various disciplines, at all the various distances, that I think he's going to cause Usman problems, and I will not be surprised if he wins. I don't even think there's a way he could win that would surprise me. He could stop Usman with punches, he could submit him, or he could win a decision. I can see all of those fairly clearly. So, not going to be surprised if Usman wins, or if Burns wins. But Usman thus far has proven himself to be an incredibly, incredibly difficult puzzle to solve. And I do favor him. I favor him over the division, quite frankly. Anyway, that is your main event. I'm going to go kind of quickly through the rest of these. Because again, there's not a whole lot extra here. Because, I mean, if you want to know how quickly this drops off, your co-main event is Maycee Barber and Alexa Grasso. I don't have anything against either of those ladies, but co-main event to a pay-per-view, not so much. Barber coming off of that loss to Roxanne Modafferi in January of 2020, so a little over a year. She injured her knee in that fight. Poor Roxanne Modafferi, man. She pissed off the UFC when she beat Maycee Barber. They have been booking her in bad positions ever since, in terms of both stylistic matchups and positions on cards. You break the UFC's new toys at your own peril in that respect, I guess. But she's coming back. She's still, there's still a fair... This is a favorable matchup for her in some respects because Alexa Grasso is not a takedown threat. Grasso coming off of her flyweight debut was successful when she beat Ji-Yeon Kim. Grasso's a very technical fighter. She's actually more technical than Barber, I think, but Barber has a little bit more of the dog in her and probably hits harder. So I anticipate a mostly striking-based affair until one of them realizes they're not having their way, and then they might try to force things down. You know, people talk all the time about, well, their wrestling cancels each other out, so we get sloppy striking affairs, which is a observed and documented phenomena. The reverse is true as well, believe it or not. And again, we just don't talk about it a whole lot. Uh, and what we get, you get two strikers. Their striking kind of cancels each other out in the sense that we either get a really boring fight, or we get a forced series of grappling exchanges. Don't know that we'll get either of those here, but it is something to pay attention to, I think. As far as picks, I kind of want to favor Grasso. Grasso has demonstrated ability, but she just has struggled to really hit that next gear, you know? I hate people saying, "Oh, we're going to trying to take it to the next level." It's such a like catch-all phrase. Uh, but in Grasso's case, again, demonstrated ability, but hitting that next level, that's been a bit of a difficulty for her. So we'll see how that goes. I kind of favor Barber a little bit, but very, very competitive fight as far as I can tell on paper. See, Kelvin Gastelum and Ian Heinisch. It's not a bad fight. Not really excited for it, but it's not bad. Gastelum on a 3-fight losing streak. Yeah, he's in a rough spot. I mean, the loss to Adesanya, fine. Adesanya is the best middleweight in the world. Lost to Darren Till. A little surprised by that split, but then submitted by Jack Hermanson in 1 minute and 18 seconds via heel hook. He's in a rough spot. That fight with Adesanya might have taken more out of him than we realized. Whereas Heinisch, he stopped Mershart in June of last year, but he's been quiet ever since. Again, the best version of Kelvin Gastelum is a top-tier, elite-level fighter. But he has not been able to find the best version of himself consistently enough. I'm still going to favor Gastelum here, but with his slide, man, he's kind of in do-or-die territory. Bantamweight, Pedro Munoz and Jimmy Rivera. Yes. Great fight. Rivera, unfortunately, just barely broke a 2-fight losing streak. He's still only 2-3 in his last 5. I mean, to be fair to Jimmy Rivera, those losses are, the head kick loss to Marlon Moraes, beat John Dodson, then lost to Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan. So you lost to the top 2 guys and a guy on his way to a title shot back in 2018 in Moraes. I'm not going to hold that too much against you. Nobody in the UFC has beat Peter Yan, and Sterling hasn't lost since Moraes in 2017. Again, I'm just not going to be that. I'm going to keep those in mind as important losses, but I'm not going to hold those against you too much. That's a tough string of fights, man. Moraes, Dodson, Sterling, and Yan. That's a meat grinder of a schedule. I don't know too many people that wouldn't have come out with not only that exact same record, but maybe worse if they lose to Dodson as well. And Munoz coming off of that split decision loss to Frankie Edgar. I thought he won that fight. I scored it for him at least. Before that, he lost pretty clearly to Aljamain Sterling, so he's in a bit of a need for a win. Could be a really good fight here. I'm going to lean Munoz. I shouldn't, though. I mean, I don't have anything against Munoz, but yeah, you know what? No, I'm going to lean Rivera. I'm going to lean Jimmy Rivera, but close fight, good fight. After the main event, that's the best fight on this card. Those two. And kicking off the main card, middleweight fight between Maki Pitolo and Julian Marquez. With the luck of Julian Marquez, this fight will fall out in the next couple of days. That poor guy. Man, Pitolo, I mean, they're trying to just set up a fun brawl here. Pitolo's UFC record is 1-3. Uh, I mean, the man's got hands. He's willing to throw down. That'll endear you to the UFC. I'm I'm actually gonna lean Marquez here, but that layoff is legit. Anyway, that's your main card, and two at least good fights. Barber and Grasso, not bad. Heinisch and Gastelum, not bad. Pitolo and Marquez, we might get something crazy out of that. But your value fights, as far as your money goes, it's the main event, and then it's Munoz and Rivera. As for the prelims, Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Sentimentally, I favor Miller, but and Miller's just in a rough spot, you know. He's actually not done that badly recently. 3-2 in his last 5. Where's Green? Green just had just lost a pretty good win. Lost his 3-fight winning streak when he fought Thiago Moises. I should favor Bobby Green, but I'm gonna favor Miller because sentimentality. Yell at me if you want. Middleweight fight: Rodolfo Vieja and Anthony Hernandez. Hernandez has not had a great time in the UFC. And while Vieja, does he prefer Vieira? I can't remember. I know he's Brazilian, so you'd think Vieja, but some of them have weird kind of preferred pronunciations. I don't have a problem favoring Vieja here. I think he'll get Hernandez down, and then that's a bad place to be, man. Being on the ground with Rodolfo Vieja, bad place. Welterweight: Belal Muhammad and Diego Lima. Diego Lima's actually he's kind of found himself a little bit over his last 3 fights. Whereas Muhammad's just a tough out. I mean, that guy's only losses in the UFC are Alan Jouban, Vicente Luque, and Jeff Neal. So I'll favor Muhammad. I mean, I won't be shocked if Lima pulls that off, but Muhammad is, again, just a tough out. Women's strawweight: Poliana Viana and Mallory Martin. Martin's gone 1-1. Viana's been a little bit up and down. She's she's 2-3. Has a 3-fight losing streak, and kind of sandwiched between her successful debut and then most recently successful fight. Probably Martin. Then our early prelims: Ricky Simone and Brian Kelleher. It's a solid fight. Probably favor Simone there. Gabriel Green and Philip Rowe. I don't know enough about either gentleman. Favor Rowe because why not? And kicking everything off, women's flyweight: Jillian Robertson and Miranda Maverick. Maverick had a pretty solid debut when she beat Liana Jojua. Let's see. Robertson lost to Tyla Santos. I don't mind picking Maverick here, but again, Robertson is not an easy fight. Not an easy fight by any stretch of the imagination. So, that's UFC 258. I will have coverage in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. You can also go there to find my full report for UFC and ESPN Plus 42. Appreciate all that. And let's see. I think the only thing I kind of wanted to touch on here... excuse me. The UFC's going through some roster cuts at the moment. They've released about a dozen guys. Most of these don't surprise me at all. Carlton Minus, Peter Barrett, Anthony Ivey, Jacob Kilburn, Sarah Morris, Vinicius Moreira, Cole Williams, Reese McKee, Vanessa Mello. I mean, they're all guys with people with losing UFC records. In some cases, they are completely absent wins in the UFC. I mean, Vinicius Moreira was 0-4. The two kind of surprising ones. One was Spike Carlisle, who's 1-2. A little bit surprising because the man is, and I don't mean this as an insult, he was a television fighter. You put that guy on a screen, he was going to deliver something worth watching. So a little bit surprised there. The other one, and kind of the big one, was Antonio Carlos Jr., Shoeface. Uh, his UFC, he lost 3 in a row, which kind of is what prompted this, but he has some pretty significant wins in the UFC. Uh, he's the one that's most surprising. Probably the one most likely. Him and Carlisle would be the two most likely, I think, to get back into the promotion at some point in the future. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, the UFC's been saying that they've had roster cuts coming for a while, and their roster just did get bloated. I mean, it sucks for some of these guys, but if you don't win, uh, especially your first couple of fights, if you're 0-2, 0-3, or losing record like 3-6. Which what Sarah Morris was at, and then I think was on like a 3-fight losing streak. Uh, Again, it's rough, but the fight game is that it's rough. So, yeah, that's probably a few more coming. There's probably some more cuts coming. Some of them are going to be tough. That's There's not a whole lot else to to kind of bring out there. Um, I think that's about it, actually. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Loosely related to UFC 258. I, there was supposed to be a fight between Chris Weidman and Uriah Hall. That got booted after Weidman had a COVID issue. Yeah, I mean, 258's had some real. They better hope nothing happens to that main event. I mean, I don't mean to kind of backtrack to this, but if something happens to Usman or Burns, um, that card's in trouble. That card would be in real trouble if something happened to one of those two guys. Uh, Serious trouble. Let me check Twitter real fast. See. I mean, I'm doing this in the wake of the Super Bowl, so I don't think there's too much crazy that's come out. MMA related recently. Yeah, I think that's going to be about it. All right. So let's go ahead and get into plugs here, and then we'll get out of this one. Again, UFC 258 this coming Saturday, so please stop by and check out my live coverage in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. Full report on last week's event is up now. If you want to read it, there's some of the official videos released by the UFC of some of the finishes. If you want to look at them there, I try to include those whenever possible. And I've been trying very hard to make sure that the sources I use are not geo-locked. Sometimes they are. I apologize for that, but there's a finite amount of control I have over that stuff. You can find me Fridays in the Wrestling Zone covering WWE SmackDown. Is there anything coming out? I think it was this last week, I got together with Mark Radulich on Damn You Hollywood, and we talked about the Netflix exclusive film Outside the Wire, which I pretty roundly bagged on. I did not care. Did not care for the majority of that movie. I've got some alternative boxing commentaries with Mark up. One for a crappy heavyweight fight that no one cares about. One for the fight between Caleb Plant and Caleb Truex. Coming up, later this week, there will be a TV party for Disenchantment Part 3. And then next week on the 11th will be Damn You Hollywood for the Netflix movie Space Sweepers, which came out very recently. Let's see. I think that's the only stuff in the immediate future. Yeah, the other stuff we can talk about next time. You don't care too much about what's going on. So please, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can find our stuff there. We're part of the W2M network. That's W letter 2M. You can find the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page to help stay up to date on all that stuff. So please do that. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you all very, very much as usual. I'm Robert Winfrey, Reminding y'all to stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.